All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's Wednesday, July 10th, 2019, and I'm going to do an abbreviated session of the Investing Systems Trading Service live show because I have an appointment in the city at around noon, and it's going to take me an hour to get there. So, anyway, I'm going to do a quick show here, maybe about 30, try and get through it 30 minutes. S&P 500 hitting an all-time high as we speak, just crossed 3,000, and this is due to, oh, I know it hit 3,000. There you go. The high was 3,000. And of course, this is due to the fact that Jerome Powell, who, by the way, is testifying before Congress today and tomorrow, he basically came out this morning and said that they're going to go ahead and basically assured a rate cut for July. So now the big question will be whether it's 25 basis points or 50 basis points. And it's kind of funny, stock market at an all-time high and the Fed's cutting rates to keep the expansion going. Right now, we're in the longest expansion, meaning time between recessions in the history, and so all systems are go, right? So I have a trend line on this chart, which is, and I've seen quite a few people drawing like this big megaphone pattern on the chart. I don't have the lower trend line on here, but you can envision connecting the lows with the trend line. But anyway, so I got this trend line going across the highs from 2018, just for the fun of it, because I see other people drawing it, and there you go. And so, in theory, that is going to be, if the market is able to push up there, that's going to be a point of overhead resistance in theory. So we'll have to see about that. But for right now, lots of excitement on CNBC, and everybody's talking about S&P 3000, and so might as well enjoy it while we can. Funny thing is, a couple of weeks ago, not last week, but the week before, this Wednesday right here. You remember I was on the show being a little bit cautious, and I drew like a little um, zone here where I thought maybe the market would sell down and fill that gap, which never happened. And I talked about how, no matter what I think the market's going to do, there's always the possibility at any time that it can, turn around and keep going up. And so that's exactly what happened. We had this sort of parabolic run up here off of this correction, and then a little consolidation, another run up, and then a little pullback and consolidation, and look where we are now. So, this is a great thing about the system that, well, the system being, automated on the back end and totally logical, systematic type of, trading strategy means that, you just kind of you stick to what's going on and don't try and second guess the market. So pointless really to try and pick a market direction, right? And so people tend to, and myself included, because I'm human, tend to get you get a pullback like this, which was like 6%, and you think, oh man, if the market loses, if the market breaks down here, it's gonna, retest this, and you start drawing like, support levels on it. But just goes to show that the market's going to do what it's going to do, and obviously, central bank stimulus and easing and all that kind of stuff makes for makes for a market that just wants to rip higher. And this is a pretty big move that we've had here. So anyhow, I figured what we would do is quickly, like I said, it's going to be an abbreviated show today, but I figured we would dig into some of the open trades, look at the pending trades, and I really want to do a show, and maybe we can do this next week, where I can get Jeffrey on here, and we can kind of do a review, like a basic going back to the beginning sort of review of how to use the service. That'd be kind of cool, I think. But in the meantime, what I've been doing lately is just kind of going over some of the charts of the stocks and looking at some of the open positions and pending trades and that. And, so I figured today would be a good day for that. So anyway, without further ado, let's take a look at the stocks that have triggered most recently. So this MDB here, let's see, it's triggered 2 days ago. So we didn't have anything new that triggered last night. So this is the most recent one. Mongo database. That's a pretty nice uptrend. Nice uptrend, fairly significant pullback, and so there you go. Now it did kind of open higher today, push up a little bit. It looks like it wants to maybe dip, but the idea is that this particular pullback um, turned into a big cup, right? And so I didn't actually mark the target on this one, but the target's up here at 173.50. So that's kind of looks doable on strength. Interestingly enough, this just triggered 2 days ago, right here on 7/8 this day. And what's interesting about this is how quickly that stop is starting to ratchet up. Right, I thought this was kind of odd. This is a little bit different than a lot of them that you'll see. Whereas the initial stop was kind of like below the lows of the pattern, and I believe that is due to just the volatility of this particular stock. So we use a monthly ATR. I believe it's 22 days, and then we cut off the two biggest, the biggest day and the smallest day. But anyway, long story short, so the volatility of this stock is incredible, and so that's why the initial stop went down here. And so far, so good. So Roku actually has a lot of people have been talking about Roku. It's already starting to form that cup here. So here's the trigger right here, which it blasted through on the 5th. So this was on the 5th. We actually had a bunch of stocks trigger, like 5 of them. So again, you can see that this particular stock had the initial stop like right sort of at the low of the pattern, right below that pivot low, and it ratcheted as of today. It's ratcheted up fairly quickly. So this is the trigger day, and here we are, 2 days later, basically after it triggered. This stop is coming up, and my guess is it's gonna ratchet up fairly quickly. So if you ever see an initial stop that looks crazy, like it's way too low, keep in mind that they ratchet up extremely quickly. So let's see. I never did for some reason. For some reason, I didn't mark the target on Roku, and guess what? The target here is 104. Interesting. So I mean, it's basically hit the target. Hit the target looks like yesterday. That was pretty quick. So let's see. Yesterday's high, yeah, it was 104.44. So that's 104. So there we are. Target 104. Yeah, my guess is this stop will come up pretty quick here, depending on what it does today. So it's kind of nice to see the target rather than being up like past the high there. It's nice to see the target's kind of like a 3/4 retrace. So Roku looking pretty good. Really sort of a positive chart here. And so, this is exactly what the system is designed to do: is to take a stock that's in a primary uptrend, wait for a pullback, and then once that pullback sort of works itself out and the stock resumes its uptrend, then we want to jump on board. So looking pretty good. Next one, TTD. I do have this one marked up. This one triggered on the 5th as well, which was this day right here. And you can see all the details on there. The initial stop, really kind of wide to start off with. And I believe as well that that's a function of the volatility of this stock. I mean, a couple of ATRs down, you don't want to get knocked out like immediately. So it's all sort of based on the volatility of the stock. We've had another trade in this that worked out really well back over here. You can see like the trigger over here and how wide that stop was, and it basically started trailing up over here, and then it looks like it got closed ahead of earnings. And that's something else I wanted to mention here, is that earnings season is gearing up, and as you know, we close any open positions before they release earnings so that there's no huge surprises. And so basically, when you see all these like open positions or whatever, we still have like, I'm gonna say like a week, maybe even 2 weeks. I've gone through all the open positions, and it looks like it's gonna be around the last week of July when we start getting the majority of them actually releasing earnings. So it's possible that between now and then, a bunch, some of them will get closed just based on, running up, hitting the stop, the trailing stop, I should say. And there's another Twilio. Twilio, boy, this thing is just, I mean, it's just a massive uptrend. Here was back at the beginning of the year, this was one of the best moves that we had here. You can see where it got closed ahead of earnings. And yeah, this was like I think this is on the closed trades. It's like a 30% gain or something. Then there was a little dip over here where it got stopped out pretty quickly. But this time around, looking pretty good here. So got triggered here on 7.5. So that would have been this day. The next day it actually gapped down a little bit, opened lower, and then pushed up through the trigger. And quite honestly, that's almost one of the best setups that you can have, right? Because the idea is that we're waiting for a close above the trigger, and then the following day, as Jeffrey always says, the following day is the best day to buy, right? And so if you get a little open that's below the trigger, and then it actually pushes up through the trigger, that gives you an opportunity to get in, as close as possible to the trigger. Because some of these stocks they close over the trigger, and then the next day they gap up and run away, and so your entry price may be above the trigger, which is no big deal, right? It's no big deal, but if you've watched enough of these, you've seen that all sorts of different scenarios happen. Looking at this chart, the only thing that sort of bugs me about it a little bit is that obviously the day's not over, but it tends to have these run ups and get like these reversals, and you get a little dip. So that's kind of it wouldn't be out of the question. And my guess is these stops are like moving up really quick, right? I mean, this thing's only 3 days in, and the stop's already come up considerably. So my guess is that stop will be close to break even by the end of the session. But as it got close to the target there, and so we'll have to see what happens with this. But now let's see. So yeah, I had to do a really quick show today, so like 30 minutes. So I wanted to look at there's there's a closed trade that I wanted to look at, and this is like really sort of extraordinary, right? And the reason I say that is because you can see what happened here, right? Like this had triggered back over here in mid-June, right? And look at that chart. I mean, beautiful chart. Really nice sort of orderly pullback, trend line break. Triggered, hit the target, consolidate a little bit, took another run to new highs. Everything was looking good. And look at how these stops ratcheted up. And the trailing stop actually made it above the trigger. And then on Monday, and I didn't even look to see what the news was, but this is sort of you don't see this very often, but it's a great example of why you know having that hard stop in, following the trailing stop, moving it up to lock in the profits is the ticket, right? And so theoretically, the way that we do things, or the way that we talk about doing things, is like either taking half the position off at the target and then letting the rest run with the trailing stop, or like the system itself does, is the system will close a trade, only close a trade, I should say, when it hits the T stop, the trailing stop. And so there you go. That's when it hit the T stop. But you certainly wouldn't have wanted to not have a stop in and end up with a day that looked like this, even though it recovered. By the end of the day it had recovered quite a bit, but that's what happens when bad news hits. And my guess, since this is a biotech stock, it was something out of the ordinary. But and the funny thing is, this still ended up being, like a 14% gain between the trigger price and this trailing stop, which is nothing to sneeze at. But the max traction, like the max gain, was 26 over 26% from the trigger here to the high. So yeah, it's just a really sort of unusual circumstance. And before earnings season, you do get companies that come out and release earnings warnings. So, let's see a few other stocks that are interesting. Open trades now. Look at this, AMD. All of a sudden, I think Kramer was talking about AMD this morning, but all of a sudden, AMD and the chip stocks are sort of back in vogue a little bit, and you can see what's happening here. AMD, nice uptrend, decent pullback, fairly significant pullback, turned around, and there you go. Sort of bottomed out here. This was a pretty rough patch here, but that sort of coincided with pullback in the chip stocks, and started moving up like it was going to form this big cup, which it is, and jumped on board somewhere in the neighborhood of 30.50 to 31, depending on, yeah, somewhere in this neighborhood. I mean, it's we've kind of designed this so that, and we've talked about this, if you happen to be new, the best idea would be to go back and watch a few of the first few videos where we talked a little bit about sort of how everything is designed to work and how to trade with it. And so maybe next week or within the next couple of weeks, I want to do another show that sort of goes back to basics, because we haven't done that in a while. And so that'd be kind of fun. But anyway, the idea is, like, you don't sweat the nickels and dimes or even quarters, and over the series, it's going to work out well for you. So whether you got in at 31, around the open here, or or put a limit order in at the trigger or whatever, or even if you bought it the day that it pushed through the trigger, which is feasible, but not necessarily highly recommended, because in rare instances you'll get a stock that pushes through the trigger, and then the next day will gap down and drop. And if it never trades above the trigger, then it gets dropped. So it wouldn't actually show up as an open trade the following day. But I found that that's pretty rare. That hasn't happened in a while. So anyhow, here you go. Here's AMD. This is exactly what you want to see, right? Exactly what you want to see. Stock triggers. Yeah, this weird gap up. A couple days later, consolidated, and that's quite a move there, quite a move. And so my guess is that at this point, it wouldn't be a bad idea. And see, this is where the flexibility sort of comes in, right? I mean, we've created the system itself is all programmed logic, and it's you know, but we've the flexibility of how you can actually trade with it is open ended, which is great, because some people have more time to spend on this stuff, and want to micromanage stuff more, and other people, they're working all day and they come home and can easily follow along, and everything in between, really. But my suggestion would be, if you were sitting on AMD right here and you hadn't sold at the target, would just be to place a stop right at 33 there. And I mean, if for some reason, and we've seen this before, I mean, this market can run away, right? Like, this thing could gap up tomorrow and put a big giant long range day, and we'll probably start to see the parabolic stop kick in on this. My guess is there'll be a parabolic stop on this stock, that will kick in here after this move. So I'm kind of surprised there's not one right below yesterday's low, but anyway, the trailing stop's gonna ratchet up. But see, here's one of the things that, and in the past this has happened over different cycles since we started this, but there's every possibility the stock can make a big move like this and then turn around and come down and hit that trailing stop and get closed, right? Could get closed for a small loss, even though the stock made like a really super significant move. And so it sort of behooves you to take a little initiative. And when you see certain things like this, see, that's the thing, is like there's so many different permutations of what can happen with these stocks that the system can only do so much. So my thought would be is that since this has made such a significant move, and of course this trailing stop is going to come up quick and it's going to be over the trigger, but I wouldn't wait for I wouldn't wait or let it come back down too much further, right? This is a good place to start thinking about locking it in. Same with Facebook, right? Let's see, Facebook. Yeah, I got the stop here at 191, and this is pretty amazing because I don't know if you guys recall, but a couple weeks ago or even last week, I mentioned how I thought this chart looked kind of nasty back over here when it triggered. I didn't really particularly care for the chart, to be honest with you, and I guess this big long range sort of day down is what made me skeptical, right? Like if the price action here would have just sort of trickled down to here, and then it started to turn around, it would have looked a lot better. But this is overthinking it tends to be my downfall. And so I looked at this chart and I'm like, well, this looks nasty. But, and then I started thinking, I was looking at this last night and thinking to myself, it's kind of typical. It's kind of typical that you see a big drop right before a stock turns around and rips higher. It's almost like someone's trying to, shake out the weak hands, right? I mean, imagine the people that were in this stock that got knocked out this day. Right, that's like shaking out the weak hands right before they turn it around. And of course, obviously this probably coincided with some bad news about Facebook. There's been plenty of bad news about Facebook as far as their privacy stuff. And so anyways, look at this though. I mean, this is as of last night, Facebook was up like almost 14%. And so here you go. And then the funny thing is like yesterday, all of a sudden, I was watching halftime report, and all of a sudden, everybody's bullish on Facebook now. And so that's just how everything works. Is like if you went and if you were listening to CNBC this day, big problems with Facebook, and everybody's, probably bearish and cautious on it, and, this and that. And then it makes this huge move up, and then all of a sudden everybody's bullish, right? And so it is what it is. Hey, let's take a look at Roku. Roku is another stock that triggered here recently. Did we look at this already? I'm just kind of jumping around here, but Roku's been kind of in the news, and so you got a nice little cup here. Look at how quickly that initial stop moved up here, right? And so, I mean, this thing's only been open for a couple of days now, and so these stops will trail up very quickly. So anyhow, let's see. Roku's got a pretty good looking little chart going here. Hit the target relatively quickly. My guess is this stop will come up tonight after the close. And interestingly enough, you see a move like this, and then you see a little pullback, and you think, oh, this could very well be a pivot high, and this move could be over. But you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised, right? It could just consolidate around this target up here and be headed much higher. So pretty good looking, pretty good looking stock. Let's see. I had jotted this ENPH down. Jotted this down to take a look at. Oh yeah, okay. So this is one I think we talked about last week. It was just triggering last week, And so there you go, another one. This was a beauty, right? I mean, this was a good looking stock here, and you can see it kind of is a gap up, and this huge run up got really extended, pulled back, and then just basically resumed the uptrend. This is another one that just sort of by looking at this chart right here, um, I'm thinking that like if I was in the stock and looking at it yesterday at the close, I would have been thinking about protecting the profit right below that low right there, and so this is another one where basically you would have look at this chart and just kind of surmise the way when it really pulls away from sort of this primary trend here, it tends to go into pullback mode. And so that doesn't mean it's going to come all the way back to this trend line, right? But just sort of looking at it, I mean the targets are there for a reason, and so just selling at the target, or even if you got in a little bit higher, all you would have to do is just add the difference between the trigger and the target. Right? Does that make sense? And so that's, I mean, when I talk about the system being sort of flexible, that's another sort of little trick you could use, right? So the trigger was 1830, and so let's see, which day did this trigger? This triggered on 7/2, which was this day. And so the following day, the stock opens at 1867, so 37 cents higher, right? And so if you added 37 cents to the target, you basically, you still basically could have. Yesterday's high was 2059, and so that's one little trick you could use, and that would give you the basically the performance match of from the trigger price to the target, right? So nothing wrong with that. There's lots of flexibility here. I mean, basically what you're working with is, the initial stop, the trailing stop targets, and the fact that these stocks are really super high powered stocks to begin with, which brings me to, and by the way, no new trades triggered last night. Brings me to the pending trades here. I wanted to blaze through these pending trades and just sort of look at the charts. This one's not really one of my favorites. And something else about this that you may notice is that this stock's under $10, right? So quite honestly, this may have slipped through the cracks, right? But hey, so I'll ask Jeffrey about that. Now this one looks good, right? I looked through these, and this is a pretty good looking stock. I mean, that's a solid uptrend. Lots of consolidation here. I'm thinking that this thing can, and of course it's having a little, another little consolidation day today, but we'll see. We're looking for a close, and I hate like marking the trigger on these charts, because the idea is that we're looking for a close over that, and so the it's a moving target, right? This can be different tomorrow. So anyway, good looking chart though. SEDG. There's not very many pending stocks, and so I can just basically just blaze through all these. That's a heck of an uptrend. Kind of, there's a little bit of a pullback, but that is one good looking chart there. So 6330 is the current trigger, so that's right there. That's barely enough of a pull. This is almost more like a breakout looking type of trade than a pullback. But at the same time, this particular stock has a has a 3.1% ATR, and so from that high to that low, probably enough of a little dip to get things like set up. So good looking stock though. QURE. Yeah, here's one that's in the midst of a dip. Interesting how it's kind of dipping today like that. But this is what sets you up for a pivot low, and then of course this is a pretty nice uptrend here. Stock comes down, has a pivot low, reverses, and goes up and makes new highs, right? Not the best looking one out of the batch. This one looks pretty good. This is a nice little sort of, hate to draw the trend line there, but this is setting up pretty well. Setting up pretty well for a little sort of breakout here. So these are stocks that are on the pending list, and like I say, the actual trigger price is very the trigger price is fluid, right? So basically wait until you see this thing hit the triggered today list. This one looks pretty good. ARWR looks pretty good. Winnebago, it's a pretty good looking stock too. Boy, look at that. Real nice pullbacks, higher highs, higher highs. So this is in pullback mode right now. Vips. Vips is another, all right, what's going on with my charts here? There we go. Yeah, Vips is another interesting sort of zigzag stock. It's under 10 bucks too. So, all right, my charts are starting to bomb out, so I'm going to have to probably wrap this up quickly. But, all right, so there we go. There we go. It looks like this was. Looks like we had a trade on this that I marked the trigger and wasn't really following. We did have one over here that I believe hit the target, so I can't mark them all up, right? I mean, I suppose I could, but it's a lot of work. So the ones that the ones that I actually like, as long as I have this on here, I'm gonna mark this trigger right here. It's at 42.80. Triggers at 42.80. And so that last trade looks like it, got a little bit of traction and probably hit a trailing stop. So just for the fun of it. So this trigger's like way up here right now. Right? It looks like it would have to like break out of this consolidation, but what you'll notice is that over the next few days or the coming week or whatever, this probably come down. So if this stock like pulls back down towards the bottom of this range, then my guess is there we go. My guess is you get a little pullback, out into next week down here, and then this trigger like slowly sort of work its way down, depending on time and price or factors here, and then you get that turnaround, rips through the trigger, and there you go. So that's I mean this is all kind of based on patterns and technical analysis and the ATRs of the stock. Everything's programmed to be sort of consistent with good technical analysis, and so there you go. And so what we're seeing here is just kind of I'm showing like the patterns and how I think it's playing out, but everything's being computed by the back end system. So that was kind of fun. Took a quick run through some of the open trades, some of the closed trades. You can see, boy, some of these things. Is CVI, whoops, CVI. There was a typo. This is just absolutely on a straight up tear here. Look at this thing. And so this is kind of, the idea is that there's going to be lots of them that kind of flounder around. They get some traction, they come back down, maybe hit the stop. But every now and then, this is kind of what, things, the way that it looks when things really work out is, you get triggered in, you run up to the target, stop gets moved way up, and then the stock just basically goes into one of these type of moves right here. So my guess is this P stop's gonna float up here, the trailing stop's gonna come back up. But what a beauty! So that's what it looks like when it works. So anyway, apologize for having to wrap the show up early today, but like I said, I got an hour drive to get to an appointment in the city that's at noon, and so I need to get ready to do that. So I appreciate y'all showing up today. And next week we'll dig into some of this stuff more. And obviously, if you ever have any questions about any of this, just shoot us an email. Thanks for showing up, guys.